All right. So I'm going to go ahead and start. We're actually a couple minutes over. Welcome to tonight's Zoom presentation. We hope that tonight, in the next 20 minutes, you'll be able to learn some information that will help make this fall's remote learning more successful for both you and your child or your children. Tonight, we are going to, Annie, if you want to go to the next slide.
Sure.
Sorry, I know you're multitasking.
Sorry.
So we'll do introductions in just a moment. I am going to give a brief overview of Zoom, kind of what it is, and then talk about some of the safety features and policies that the district has in place. And then the majority of our session will be on how to prepare for Zoom meetings, what you can do as a parent or guardian to help make sure that they are successful, and some common tools that are going to be used by staff and by teachers during these Zoom meetings. At the bottom, it does say that chat feature is available. So let's do introductions, and then maybe Annie, you can talk about the chat feature. My name is Seth Baker. I've taught 3rd through 8th grade in District 97. I currently teach 5th grade at Irving Elementary. Annie?
I'm Annie Darley. I teach 4th grade at Whittier. Really happy to be part of Parent University tonight and looking forward to seeing kids starting the school year very soon. I have chat enabled. There are different ways to use chat on Zoom. This evening we have the chat feature enabled, so it's just used as question and answer for us, the hosts. So if you have a question as the presentation is happening, you can go ahead and chat it, and if it doesn't get answered in the presentation, we will do so at the end of the meeting. The 3 of us hosts will be the only 3 who do see that chat. We could have a different feature using chat tonight where all of us would be able to chat to each other. This is really helpful for responses from students with different questions and gives a really immediate way to get student feedback by typing. But tonight, we have it so that it's more of a Q&A format. So welcome.
Hi, everybody. I am Mackenzie. I'm a 4th grade special education co-teacher at Whittier. I work with Annie. So to kick off tonight's presentation, we have a parent poll that I'm going to launch in just a minute. The reason that we are doing a poll is to gauge our audience and see who we have in the room, and then also to familiarize you with some of the tools that your children might be using with their teachers. So I'm going to launch a poll right now that has to do with your Zoom level experience. So you should see it pop up on your screen, and it says, how familiar are you with Zoom? Either beginner, proficient, or expert. And as the host of, or co-host of this meeting, I can see that you guys are quick. 68, 76, 78% of the people have voted. Just waiting on a couple more. We're at 91%. So I'll give just a couple more seconds to see how the room is feeling. 100%. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share our results. So it looks like we have 23% of us are beginners, 74% proficient, and 1 expert in the room. Awesome. So I'm going to stop sharing, but this is really going to be helpful for us to know where we are at, where you feel you are at, and how we can kind of guide the conversation. So I'm going to pass the mic to Seth, and we can get started.
So as Mackenzie just mentioned, using that polling feature is a very simple way to do a formative assessment with students to kind of gauge how they're doing on a certain content or topic, and it's very quick. You don't see who answered what, but it does give me a general sense that this audience overall feels pretty good about what Zoom is. So I wouldn't necessarily need to go into as much detail on Zoom. If a majority of participants said that they were beginners, that they really didn't know, then I could spend more time on that. So what is Zoom? Zoom is a video conferencing, for many of you, you know. For students in District 97, if they are in elementary school, they will be using the iPad to access Zoom meetings. And if they're in the middle school, they'll be using a Chromebook to access those. If you attended earlier sessions tonight, there was conversation about synchronous versus asynchronous learning. This is synchronous learning. This is real time. This is me sitting in my house having conversations with you. Zoom is used for synchronous learning. Annie, if you can go back to that, sorry. Thank you. So Zoom is used for synchronous learning, and teachers might use Zoom in a variety of different ways. They might use it for whole group instruction. They might use it for small group instruction with things called breakout rooms. They also will have Zoom for asynchronous as office hours, so they would be available to have real-time conversations with students and families. All right, thank you, Annie. So the district has put a lot of things in place to try and make sure Zoom is a safe environment for learning. So right now, the Zoom meetings are controlled, if you will, by teachers in a couple ways. In order to gain access to a Zoom meeting, students and families can do it a couple different ways. They can have a link into that Zoom meeting. That link will only be shared through private emails directly to the families or to the students. So there are no Zoom links that are accessible to the public. The other thing that is a feature that's used are passcodes. So there can be a passcode put to every meeting. So in order to actually enter into a Zoom meeting, you need to know that passcode. And only teachers are able to allow participants in and out. There's also no recordings. We are recording this Zoom meeting because we want to make sure it's available for any families who weren't able to attend tonight. But for classroom instruction with students and teachers, they are not recorded and there are no photos. The only time screenshots would be taken is if students need to take a screenshot of content that was shared through Zoom, not of photos or images of their classmates. In the same way that you get prepared for school, if this was in school, you need to be prepared, or students need to be prepared for Zoom meetings. And now the bulk of our session will really focus on these. So getting ready for school, getting ready for Zoom. You need to make sure that you have physical space set up. So having a place in your home or where a student is that has access to all the materials that they will need, kind of a workspace, a quieter space, and making sure they have everything they need for their lessons. So what does that really mean? So there's three kind of areas for this. Student self-care is important. This is video conferencing, so students will be on screen and will be seen by their classmates and teacher. So personal hygiene is still important. This is a virtual classroom, so the same kind of expectations that would be in place at school many of them are in place in a Zoom meeting, so they're not eating during a Zoom meeting, they're dressed appropriately. The last bullet there, they sit up comfortably. You want to make sure that students are in a space that's going to be comfortable for them, because in some instances, that depending on their age, they may be in a Zoom meeting for an hour or so. So we want to make sure they're comfortable. Having that workspace as comfortable and quiet as possible with limited distractions is important. And again, they would have materials like they would at school. They would have a desk. In a Zoom meeting at home, they may have a container or a box, a cardboard box or a milk crate, something, or a backpack where they keep their materials with them. They want to make sure that they have a charged iPad or Chromebook, so it's ready, fully charged. Again, any materials they might need. A stylus is a good tool. A lot of teachers may have students actually write directly on their device and annotating. And finally, making sure you know how to log in. So paying attention to emails that are sent and knowing the link or knowing the password is important. So all of this is before a Zoom meeting actually starts. I'm going to send it back to Mackenzie for our second activity.
Okay, so it's time for another poll. Before we start discussing some of the student tools and the teacher tools that we want to teach you about, it's going to be important for us to know in the audience what grade your child or children attend. We know that kindergarten and first grade students might not be using the same types of tools offered through Zoom that 7th and 8th graders will be using. And we do know that in the beginning of the year with our younger students, they will need a little more help from whoever's at home with them to help them navigate parts of the iPad, getting into Zoom meetings, knowing how to use some of the tools. But we want to let you know that all of the teachers are aware of the learning curve that might occur if people are switching devices or they're just a younger child, and we will work to gain that independence, but we'll need a little bit of help at the beginning. I think many of us know that kids these days catch on to technology very quickly, but we will take it slow in the beginning. So if you will participate in this next poll, I'm going to launch it right now, and you should see it on your screen in just a moment. And please answer the age of your child or children, what grade they are in, and you can click all that apply. So we know in the audience who we should mostly direct a lot of the tools that Seth is going to talk about next. So we're at 85% have answered the poll. I'm going to give 91%. A couple more seconds, see if we can get 4 more responses. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now, and I'm going to share our results. So we have a lot of primary families here, and then a couple 7th and 8th grade. So we are at the 2 ends of the spectrum. So Seth, when we are talking about student and teacher tools, that'll be really important for us to know. So thank you for participating, and I'm going to pass it back over to Seth.
All right, thank you. This is a really great tool to use. Our first session was primarily upper grades, and I think there was only one K-1-2 family. So the tools, and my wife teaches kindergarten at Whittier, so I know all about kindergartners working through Zoom, or I saw it firsthand. The features that are going to be used for Zoom for like a K-1-2 classroom, they may not involve all of these. Especially early on. So students get engaged in different ways in Zoom. The chat feature is something that would probably be used more at the upper grade level. It would definitely be used in, outside of the K-1 group. Reactions is something that by the end of the spring, students in my wife's class were using the reactions. That's the nonverbal, raising the hand or a little applause. There's ways to signal that. Annotations might be more of an upper grade, although some of the primary grades might begin to use that as the year moves on. Breakout rooms are something that can be done really all grades, getting students into smaller groups. Polling feature, which we've done. And then the last thing there that's mentioned is Zoom is constantly looking at improving. They realize the importance of their product and constantly looking at updating. So when new features come available, we can begin to implement those as well. Again, primarily for K-1-2, there are a couple 7th and 8th grade families out there as well, but the tools that teachers will use, being able to admit students in. Again, we talked about the waiting room to be able to kind of have a secure classroom or Zoom meeting. Muting on and off, teachers can do that, and they can also turn video on and off. So if there's a time when the teacher needs everybody's attention, they can actually mute all or individual students if they needed to. They can share screen, so going to different websites, different content sources that they might use, having a whiteboard to be able to draw with students or have students actually draw on it, using desktop cameras to be able to project other materials or books that they might be reading. And then breakout rooms, polls, and again, annotating are all features that teachers can utilize during a Zoom meeting. And what would students do? Again, for a K-1-2 audience, a lot of those students will be practicing that mute and unmute to be able to hear what's going on in the Zoom meeting, to try and eliminate some of the background noise that sometimes happens. Students can rename themselves. In upper grades, sometimes I know I did that with students where they would rename with a letter or a number in front of their name to be able to get them in different groups. The gallery versus speaker view is something students can control. So in that upper corner, there's a way to click it so that you can see everybody who's part of that Zoom meeting, or just the person who's speaking, or primarily the person who's speaking. That's a really good tool for students if they can become distracted. So they're really just focusing on the speaker. Chatting, again, that may not be something that's used in the younger grades, but in the upper grades, as well as annotating. Polls, the breakout rooms for small group. The virtual background at the last one there is important. Students can change the background behind them. And that's an important feature because for some students, being in their home or being able to project where they are is something that they don't necessarily feel comfortable with. So we really do want to see students as much as possible so we can gauge them and kind of engage with them and interact with them. But they can change their background so that they don't see my living room, but I could have a different background behind me. And students can control that or change that. All right, look at my time. So we got about 5 minutes. Annie, I'm gonna pass it over to you for our next activity.
Okay, thanks. So one of the cool features of Zoom is annotating. An example of the way that I used this with my fourth graders in the spring last year over Zoom was in a small breakout room with 4 other students. I was able to show the math book page we were working on. 4 students could each take a problem on that page and begin actually writing or typing in answers. They can use their finger as a stylus, or they can use a text box. And there are other annotating tools that make it really easy for me to watch what students are doing on the screen right there, and for us to be able to have a conversation back and forth about it. This goes along with one of the questions that I had from a parent right now asking, when Seth mentioned whiteboards as a screen share device, that is a Zoom tool. And it's one of the ways that students and teachers can have a whiteboard. It's not the same as what we'd have in our classrooms. It's a screen shared whiteboard. Maybe I'll pull it up at the end, but participants and the teacher can write answers on it collectively, and it's really cool. So just for fun, we're doing this a little lighter, but we wanted to give you a chance to experiment with annotating. So we invite you to think about the best day of your summer and match the animal that goes with the feeling of your memory of that day. Depending on the device you're on right now, annotating works a little bit differently. If you're on a laptop, you will go to View Options at the top and then select Annotate. And for you on laptops, there's actually a stamp feature. I see somebody's already stamped the dolphin with a heart. If you're on a phone or an iPad, try clicking the pencil in the bottom left corner of your screen. And then you can either choose an arrow to place on an animal, or somebody circled the wild horse. You can draw an arrow feature. And so this is pretty cool because we can see, just as a variety, ways that you can highlight. Somebody has nimble fingers and could draw a heart. And so this is something that, as the teacher, as awesome as your drawings are, I can also clear the drawing so that as kids who are younger, we can turn off the annotating feature. For right now, I'm going to clear it, but just to show you some of the settings that we as teachers and the adults in the room would have so that we are keeping kids' safety, privacy, and appropriate school behavior with annotating in mind as we do this. It's a cool feature though. Okay.
I will also just mention that you'll notice whenever an annotation showed up, a name popped up. So that's another feature that teachers can utilize so that they can see who is actually writing and who's annotating on the screen.
That's it. Okay.
All right, the last few slides here. So I've already talked about a lot of these. This last slide is really Zoom etiquette, which is something that teachers will be spending a lot of time this fall kind of working through with students, the expectations during a Zoom meeting. And these are just some common ones that will most likely be used. Being on time is important. So much like school, Zoom meetings will start at a set time. So we want students there on time. We don't want them to miss instruction. Finding a comfortable spot, I talked about that, is important. Muting yourself unless you're speaking to the group, so eliminating background noise. Video on during synchronous learning as much as possible. Again, we know that sometimes students might need to put video off, but it really does help teachers to be able to see students engaging, and it helps us know kind of how they're doing and how engaged they are with the lesson that we're delivering. If you do change your virtual background, kind of keeping just one, so it's not just a constant rotation of that. Raising your hand, you can actually physically raise your hand. I had a lot of students in the spring just do that. Or you can use the nonverbal reaction for that. Utilizing chat. You can communicate directly with the teacher. Again, Mackenzie talked about, or I think it was Annie talked about how you can change the settings on that. So just some common tips. There'll be a lot more this fall directly from your classroom or from your teachers, your student's teacher rather. And finally, as we move into remote learning or move back into remote learning this fall, tech support, you can reach out to the classroom teacher. They can guide you through and help you in a lot of ways. But if there's specific tech issues that you're experiencing, the help desk at op97.org is a site to go to. And then people at the ad building are monitoring that all the time, and they can get back in touch with you and work through tech issues. And the last advice really is to try it at home. If you haven't used Zoom, or if your child hasn't used Zoom, logging in, it's a free account. You can just open up a Zoom account. And having them just practice with it and see the different features. So we've run a little bit over time. Thank you very much for attending. Annie, are there any other questions that showed up?
Just a couple questions. One question is, will everyone be on the same version of Zoom with the same features? So we, District 97 has an agreement now with Zoom. In the spring, we were using the basic free that was available for classrooms across the country on demand so quickly, but now we all have more of the features that are available through this licensing agreement. So all of the teachers in D97 have this. Zoom does look a little bit different on an iPad than a Chromebook. So the experience that kids in kindergarten through 5th grade would have with their iPads does look a little bit different than 6th through 8th, but primarily it is the same level of teacher opportunities to put kids in breakout rooms or have student settings that enable them to interact with each other and with the teacher and in meaningful ways. The other question was, how much synchronous learning are 2nd graders expected to receive? And I know that there are guidelines that have been put out by Ebony Lofton. Seth, it looked like you were about to.
I think it's 50% of instruction is synchronous.
So within
I know that's true for kindergarten, and I know for 3rd through 5th, I think it's 60%. So I think K1-2, it's 50% of the day is synchronous.
Well, it's per subject, right? So within the math hour, the 60 minutes that's allotted for that, we would expect to have
40 minutes would be synchronous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so 60% of the day, but broken out over, it's not like there's a giant chunk of just synchronous and a giant chunk of asynchronous. It would be scattered throughout the day.
If anyone else has any questions, are 2nd graders expected to type on the iPad? That's
a great question. I mean, there's different ways to communicate with Zoom. So as I talked about, like the chat feature is something that may not be used in more of the primary grades. So they may not need to have as much of, like if they're doing a Zoom meeting, they may not need to have the typing skill as much for a Zoom meeting. A lot of it can be verbal.
Sometimes teachers might put into place where if there's a sheet of paper and they want a student to answer questions on there, that they can take a picture of their work rather than typing it out. So I think that teachers have some flexibility and might make those decisions based on the students in their classroom and how well they're able to handle something like typing. But that is just what I would guess.
Right, and yeah, teachers have used, I know in the spring, and right now they're looking at getting actual whiteboards for students to be able to communicate that way. And you can hold up, I mean, these are my notes, you can hold them up to the screen to be able to communicate.
Yeah, we did that. Another question is, what will the 50% synchronous instruction look like? Is it only whole group, or is it small group, individual, or a mix? And so I think that question can be answered best as the mix. When I did a Teacher Institute this summer, we mirrored our experience with what the kids would experience. And there were times when our cameras were on, but everyone was working, while the leader of our institute took a group of us into a small breakout room on Zoom and was able to lead us through a small group discussion while the rest of the students, teachers in that case, were doing independent work, but with our iPads on and within the Zoom session. Sometimes, though, that will be with cameras off. I see our younger K through students expected to upload work, or will writing take place through Zoom? Zoom is our platform for holding live meetings, but kindergarten through second graders will be using something called Seesaw to upload their work. And so I know that there will be learning and training for that separately. That's not the same. This is just in order for us to be able to have our group meetings and our breakout sessions with students, either one-on-one or in small groups. Will the kids need to open up their own Zoom account? All of District 97 students will have a way for students to access the Zoom platform through links in their Seesaw, or links through parent email, or links through their own individual account, especially grades 3 and up. Seth, do you know for grades K through 2 what the access point is for students?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Will students need to open up their own Zoom account?
I don't know for sure. What I have heard today is that the district is looking at trying to upload everything they can through securely or through Clever, I think. So students would have an app on their iPad that they would be able to click on, and then that would just open up the Zoom account, I believe. So I know that they're working on trying to make that as easy as possible, especially for the younger groups to be able to have access to Zoom. So it's going to be part of the screen of their iPad to be able to click on an app, a Zoom app. And they should, because the district, I think, is also uploading the student emails or the student contacts so that they have their account. They will have their own account. So I don't think students will be doing that.
The last question, I believe, is, oh no, 2 more. Do you know if the students are being provided if the iPads are provided are compatible with Bluetooth keyboards?
I don't know. That's a great question.
I don't know.
I don't have a student iPad. I know that the iPads that my students used last year were new iPads. I mean, they just had they were the newest version from a year or so ago. But I don't know.
We're turning all of our chat record into the central office so that they can be aware of the questions and concerns from the group. So sorry that we're not able to answer these specifically. They're great questions. Will the synchronous sessions be all day on and off for kindergarten, or would they be at specific times of the day?
These are scheduling questions. I'm not sure. I know that the schools right now are working through schedules for the fall, but these are questions that are going outside of Zoom. So I don't know.
I have seen a sample schedule for elementary, and it does mirror what our typical 4th grade schedule was. So a morning meeting, for example, in 4th grade from 8 to 8:30, language arts from 8:30 to 10:30. I think there was something like, and this is all just as an example, but then science or social studies before lunch, and then an hour off of Zoom to have lunch and a break and take time for yourself. And then in the afternoon, there was an hour of math and time for specials. Now, someone else could have specials in the morning because of all those scheduling features. That was just an example that it would be a math time is when we might typically have it.
So Annie, I know that there's another session. I don't know. I'm not sure. I think it's already started.
And any tips for kindergartners having difficulty engaging in Zoom? And will the iPads be allowed to link to printers so we can print some of the work out?
I don't think that the iPads, I know the iPads that were used, students have used, you haven't been able to link them to printing. the work that was turned in, again, Seesaw is going to be a platform. I don't really know Seesaw. My wife is kindergarten teacher at Whittier. She has had lots of Seesaw workshops the last couple of days. And that's going to be the platform where students will be able to submit work and turn in their work. And so they're going to be doing that electronically.
Yeah.
And what was the other question?
The question is really for Caroline. Any tips for kindergartners who have difficulty engaging in Zoom? That's Seth's wife.
Yeah, she's not here. She's not right next to me. You know, I think early on, as Mackenzie talked about, there'll need to be, you know, kind of help to go through the logistics of getting in. I know that the kindergarten teachers are very cognizant of keeping the kind of engagement to a time that is appropriate for a 5-year-old, and trying to create learning opportunities that can engage them. There will most likely be smaller groupings in the younger grades more than the upper grades. I know upper grades will do groupings with smaller groups and breakout rooms. But having more small group with kindergartners is something that I think a lot of teachers will be utilizing to try and help them stay engaged. So they're not in a massive group, because it's good to have whole group, but to connect with them in more intimate ways, smaller group.
And something I might recommend at home, especially for younger students, is teachers will provide an electronic schedule of the day, but maybe having a drawn out schedule or a picture schedule or something at home on a sheet of paper where students who are younger know when they're going to be on Zoom and for how long. Sometimes timers can work for those things. It might take, some parent involvement in the beginning, but just keeping a schedule to the day can sometimes help, especially the young ones, stay focused during that face-to-face time.
My wife just talked tonight about having lessons early on with her students on setting timers on an iPad to help with that.
That's awesome.
Thank you so much, everyone. We really appreciate the time you're taking to learn more about our unusual circumstances in the fall, and we really look forward to seeing your students.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.